Hi, my name is Elizabeth Ndongo. I work in Mount Kenya University, School of Nursing, Community Health Department. So welcome to today's lesson on legal and ethical issues in community health nursing. Before we commence, I want us to do a recap of what we learned last week, and we looked at community participation and community involvement. We defined community participation as involving community members in community projects. And we said, if you want to involve the community, you have to involve them in all stages of a program development. That is from planning, implementation, and evaluation. Now I want to give an example of what we discussed last time. We said, like for example, if you go to a community, and you realize that a community have an issue of pneumonia. There are so many children with respiratory tract infection. Then you need to go into details, do a community needs assessment, understand what would be the issue of, what would be the cause of pneumonia in the community. Like for example, you get into a community and you realize that they live in a house that doesn't have good ventilation, or they use biomass or charcoal that is not well dried up, or they use wood that is not well dried up. Of course, wood and charcoal that is not well dried up will increase the level of smoke. And that smoke, if children inhale the smoke, they have high risk of pneumonia in the community or other respiratory tract infection. Or again, you find that maybe in the area they are living, again, we said, if they have poor ventilation, whereby wherever they sleep, there are no vents where they can be able to, where the airflow is not coming in and out well, that can be a main cause. So if you identify that as the first step, then you need to involve the members of the community and tell them, this is what we are going to do. We have realized that you have issues with pneumonia, another respiratory tract infection, and the main issue, the main risk factor in your community is because you use wood. So what can we do? Maybe you teach them, you tell them when they are using wood, they need to dry up so that they use dried up wood so that whenever they light their fire, the level of smoke will be reduced. You can also advise mothers, tell them whenever they are cooking in their kitchen area, they need to do so without their children so that their children do not inhale smoke. If it is the issue of ventilation, maybe you can engage the men and the people who do house design and what have you, so that they can be able to ensure that windows are open during the day and there is good flow of air, and even maybe they can do the small vent that they do so that there is good air circulation. And we learned that when you involve the community, one of the advantage would be they own the program. So once someone is involved, like if you tell them this is what we'll do and this will reduce the respiratory tract infection, then they will own up. You'll find that whenever they wake up, they open the windows. Whenever they are cooking, they use the right materials to cook. And these will reduce the issue in the community. Also, again, we said another advantage of involving the community is to increase stability of the program. So if you tell them this exactly, if you start with them from the beginning, then they'll be able to continue with the activity up to the end. And then you need to evaluate and see whether whatever they are doing have actually reduced the issues in the community. Like for example, if maybe for after 3 months or 4 months, you come back and you find that the community have been using the right firewood that is well dried up, there is no smoke, and then you look at the status of children, how many have been going to the hospital, how many have been diagnosed with a respiratory tract infection. If it reduces, then you give them a kudos and tell them, you know what, at least whatever we are doing in our activity, we have been able to reduce the issues of respiratory tract infection. That is community participation. On the other hand, we looked at community mobilization. And in community mobilization, this is whereby you bring people together so that they can work towards one direction. Like in management, we say unity of direction is very important. So if you have a group of people who don't know the main goal, then they will not be able to achieve anything. But when you mobilize a community, you ensure that they understand the goals, the idea that you have, the activity that you want them to do, and you show them the importance of doing that activity, then you will be able to work together and you will follow one unit of direction. And as a community participation in mobilization, you are able again to bring up people together and you are able to do your activity together. And the advantages are the same. There is increased community ownership of the project, there is increased sustainability of the project, and also there is community empowerment, because when you bring people together, they understand the issues that they are supposed to do. If I go back to the example of reducing smoke so that you can reduce respiratory tract infection, when the community understand that when the children inhale or when them themselves inhale a lot of smoke, this can increase the risk of a respiratory tract infection, then they'll be able to stop practicing the same activity, and they'll be able actually to change their behavior and reduce the issues in their community. So there is community participation and mobilization. So let's look at what we're going to learn today. And our learning objectives are to define concepts in ethics and law, to describe legal issues in community health nursing, and the other objective will be to describe ethical issues in community health nursing. So, definition of terms. So we'll define several times so that we can understand what are legal issues, what are ethical issues, how do we actually how do we interact with the community and overcome issues to do with ethics and also issues to do with the law. So our first definition will be ethics. Ethics comes from a Greek word meaning ethos, which means character. We can also define ethics as declaration of what is right and wrong in regards to behavior. And ethics is very important in our day-to-day life and for a community health nurse, as we will see as we continue with our lesson. Or we can say ethics are moral principles that govern how a person or a group will behave or conduct. And with ethics, we look at character, your behaviors. What are your values? What will make you behave in a certain way and not in another way? What is right and what is wrong? And sometimes it's relative. And ethics are actually those principles that someone use to make decision or to live with your character. Whatever you do, that is who you are. And we will learn more about it. So what is an ethical issue? We say an ethical issue is a problem or a situation that requires a person or an organization to choose between alternative that must be evaluated as right, that is ethical, or wrong. So you have two activities, but for them to be evaluated as right or wrong, then you must use ethical principles, as we will learn as we continue with our lessons. So the other definition is law. And law, we can say law is a rule or a system of rules. And laws are made by the government, like in Kenya. Laws are made by our Senate and our National Assembly, that is the Parliament. And also at the county level, we have the county assemblies. These are the people who make the rules that we are supposed to follow. And a law is used to order the way in which a society behaves. So what is a legal issue? As we've seen with ethical issue, a legal issue is a legal question whose outcome requires a court to make a decision by interpreting the law. And we learn more about legal issues in community health nursing and how law will help us interpret whether a nurse have committed a legal issue or not. Then litigation. So litigation is another term that we need to understand, and litigation is a process of trying a lawsuit. Like if you do not follow a law, then you will go through the litigation process and you will be judged whether you have done it according to the law or You have done it right or wrong according to the law. Then the other definition or the other term is a crime or a tort. When you're saying a crime, it's a wrong committed by a person against another person or his property. Then we have another term, misdemeanor. A misdemeanor, this is a less crime, punishable either with a fine or you are jailed for less than 1 year. Then a felony, this is also a wrong that is punishable by you being jailed for more than 1 year. So, I think that's all with the definition of terms. Now we look at our subtopic and we'll be able to actually look at our other objective legal issues in community health. And these legal issues will arise from the laws that are made by our government or the law forming bodies. So before we actually look at the legal issues, I want us to look at several issues or several concepts that are very important for us to understand legal issues in community health nursing. And the first subtopic would be sources of law. And in Kenya, our main source of law is the Constitution. And then the other source of law is statutes or law passed by Parliament, like we know of the Nurses Act and many other acts that the Parliament actually pass. Then the other source of law is administrative agencies. Like for example, as nurses, we have our council, that is the Nursing Council of Kenya. It have actually come up with rules and regulations that guide the practice of a nurse, irrespective of your area, whether you are a community health nurse, whether you are a clinical nurse, or whichever level you decide to work with. The Nursing Council of Kenya have got its laws that will help you perform your activity or serve the nation in following whatever the Nursing Council says. Then the other source of law is a tort or a court decision. And actually this one comes into being when there is a legal issue and then the judge, the court, decides on that issue. So what happens, if in case of another legal issue similar to one that have ever been judged, what the members of the judiciary will do, they will use whatever law that was made on the other issue to judge the current issues, and that is tort law or court decision. Now, let's look at types of law. We have 3 types of law, the ones that we're going to look at today. The first one is criminal law. So criminal law, this is related to crime, or it deals with behavior that can be construed as an offense against the public, the society, or the state, even if the immediate victim is an individual. An example of criminal law is murder or assault. And in nursing, an example of criminal law is where you find a nurse, like now if you are working in the community and maybe a community member is in a lot of pain, like in cases of cancer, patients are in a lot of pain, or when you're giving palliative care medicine. And if a nurse decides to give more of a dose, or maybe you give morphine and you give more of morphine, unlike what you're supposed to do, that can be a source of, that can be a crime. And you can be judged in a criminal court where you will be judged as having done a atrocious act, and it will be a felony because you're not supposed to give an overdose. Even if you're helping the patient, you're supposed to follow the prescription order. Then the other type of law is civil law. Civil law, it is law that is concerned in regulating private matters of citizens. For instance, malpractice cases can be tried in civil law. So a malpractice case, like now for example, I know we have shortages of nurses in Kenya, and you find that there are people in training, like our nursing student. If you're a nursing student right now, you are not actually qualified, you're not registered as a nurse. You're just a nursing student. If you decide to work in the community and actually maybe help a mother who is delivering or either give medication without supervision, then you can actually be committing a felony, and you will be actually judged as having done a malpractice, because actually you are not registered, you are not actually licensed to do what you are doing. So that is an example. Or for example, if you open a clinic and you claim to take care of patients or members in the community, that is a malpractice. Without a license, then you are doing a malpractice and you can be judged. That's an example of civil law, how civil law can actually put, you can go through the process and you'll be judged as having done something wrong to the members of the society. Then another type of law is administrative law. And administrative law, this is law concerned with governing the administration and regulation of government agency. Like I talked of the Nursing Council. The Nursing Council is a source of administrative law. And for nurses, you must be registered by the Nursing Council, licensed by the Nursing Council for you to practice. And that's what we are preparing you to do right now. We are teaching you all these things so that once you graduate, you will be able to do your licensing exam, get your license, and you will abide to the Nursing Act. So if you are caught doing anything against the Nursing Act, like in the past, we hear of nurses who used to be so rude or harsh to patients, and especially during delivery. Nowadays, that's something we don't do, because actually the Act states categorically that you're not supposed to harm a patient when you are taking care of them. So that is a source of administrative law. Now, let's move on. I want us to look at examples of tort. Remember, we said a tort, this is a wrong that you have done by a person to another person or to his or her property. And we will look at two types of torts. One of them is intentional tort and unintentional tort. And we can define an intentional tort like something that you have done out of, like you have deliberated upon it and you're doing it knowingly. But an intentional tort, it actually happened. You wrong someone without having planned on how to go about it, or not having deliberated on how you're gonna go about it. So the first example is an assault. And we say an assault, this is an attempt to make a bodily contact without consent. And this happens so much when you are taking care of patients. And remember, whenever you are actually engaging in a nurse-patient or nurse-client relationship, you're supposed to seek for consent. Like if you want to measure blood pressure, or if you want to take maybe temperature levels or pulse rate, you don't just go straight and you start holding the hand of the patient and then you cuff in. That will be assault, because you have not requested for consent. You're supposed to actually introduce yourself, tell them your name, and then tell them, you know what, I want to take your vital sign, I will take your blood pressure, this is the cuff, this is where I will place it, and then it will take me maybe 1 minute to take your blood pressure and what have you. And then that will be the right way to go. But if you do not ask for consent, then you will be liable to assaulting the patient. And we must be very careful, because it happens severally where you just go to your client, your patient, and you start serving them without having told them what you're about to do. Then the other example is battery. And battery, it's forceful. Actually, an example, I want to give an example. And this is funny because sometimes we don't know when we are working, either in the community or in the hospital. An example will be, you want to do a procedure, but or you want to do an examination. But instead of actually doing the examination, telling the patient what you're supposed to do, you go straight and remove their clothes. So what you're supposed to do to ensure that you do not, you're not accused of battery, as we said, informed consent is very important, and we will learn more about it. Other examples is defamation, where you say wrongful things concerning the patient. Another one is invasion of patient privacy, like with the technological advancement nowadays, and as young nurses, we want to take photos of what we are doing in the community. Like you visit a community, you realize that they are living in a way that maybe you have not seen, and you want to do a community assessment to come up with a diagnosis. And then you take photos and you start posting them over WhatsApp or wherever. That will be an intentional thought. Because whenever you do anything, whatever information you get from patient must remain private. Another example is invasion of patient we have talked about that one, invasion of patient privacy. The other one is forced confinement, where you continue treating, like an example, you continue treating a patient in your clinic, or you prolong the nurse-patient relationship when there is no need of doing that. That can be a false confinement. And then the other one is fraud, whereby actually we are saying fraud. A good example would be purposeful misinterpretation of client or patient information. Like, for example, you tell them what you feel you should tell them because you want either to get more money from them. That will be so wrong. We are supposed to be always truthful to our patient. And then on the other hand, let's look at examples of intentional or unintentional thoughts. One of them is negligent, and negligent is very easy. Negligent occurs when you do not follow the standard operating procedures. Like, for example, we have said when you go to a patient, when you go to a community, you must introduce yourself and you must tell them what you are doing. So if you do not introduce yourself and tell them what you are doing, you will be neglecting what you're supposed to do, and you may be found with issues of negligence. The other one is malpractice. I'd explained what malpractice means. Then the other one is breach of duty, where you do not do what you're supposed to do. And then the other one is either issues of causation, where if you do not follow the standard operating procedure, you can introduce infections to the patient, and that's why we always actually say it's important to follow the right procedure so that you do not cause harm to the patient. So moving on, we look at some of the legal issues faced by community health nursing. And most of these legal issues, they are tied to you being licensed, or the state of law, the scope of practice, or the public expectation that nurses must practice. They must practice, and the way they look at them, they must have high standards of etiquette or behaviors in whatever they do. So the first issue we will look at that community health nurses are faced with is the issue to do with consenting, and I have actually been talking about consenting. And in consenting, you're supposed to ensure that you disclose information. Tell the client, tell the community that what you're supposed to do. And then the other element is they should understand, comprehend what you're supposed to do. And then the last component of consenting is that they're supposed to actually do it voluntarily. So if you go to a community and you want them to, maybe you want to talk to them about behavior change, maybe you realize in a community there is a lot of risky sexual behavior. You must tell them, the first thing is to disclose. Tell them, you know, risky sexual behavior is common in this community, and the issues, maybe tell them the risk, actually the consequences of risky behavior, like high chances of contracting an STD, or high chances of contracting HIV and AIDS, which will reduce your immunity and what have you. And then after giving them the whole information, ensure that they understand what you have told them. And then if you tell them to come up with ways, maybe to come up with ways of how they can reduce risky behavior, you should not force them to use condom. They should actually understand why they are using condoms. If it's a marriage partner, then they should understand why they are maintaining, they are being faithful to one another. That is consenting. And if you do not do that, then we say you will face legal issues of either battery or the ones we have explained earlier on. The other one is issues to do with confidentiality. More often, clients, communities, patients give us their personal information. And actually, we are supposed to hold personal information with a lot of respect, whereby we are not supposed to pass information that we get from our community or from our client to other people. And issues of confidentiality are very important. But there are times where you are forced to disclose that information. Like, for example, in case of an order from the court, for you to actually give information to help in giving evidence, then you can disclose that information. Or in cases of a communicable disease, if there is a communicable disease, you do not keep quiet. Like right now, we're talking of COVID-19, and actually the government, the Ministry of Health is very categorical of people doing self-quarantine. And as a member of the community, you can disclose information of someone who is not doing self-quarantine. That is an example. Another time you can disclose information if in case of child abuse, and those are the only exemptions. But all other times you're supposed to ensure that the information of our clients or community is actually maintained private and confidential. The other one is issues with documentation. And again, we know with documentation, we're supposed to ensure that we maintain our documentation private so that we do not release what we are supposed to do. So other causes of legal issues, it's like giving narcotics. I had given that, giving narcotics like morphine without a prescription order, practicing without a valid license, conducting illegal abortion, providing patient care while under influence of alcohol. The other one is obtaining a nursing license by fraud. Maybe you forge your license. That is another legal issue that you can actually you can be found with. Let's look at how to mitigate legal issues in community health nursing. One, ensure that there is accreditation of institution, the training institution. Then you get a certificate. Once you qualify as a nursing student, you will sit for the licensing exam, you will get your license and your certificate. So, ethical issues in community health nursing. I'll be fast. Ethical issues in community health nursing occur if we do not follow the ethical principles. And the ethical principles, we have actually 4 main ethical principles that we are supposed to follow. One of the principles is beneficence. Beneficence is a duty to help others gain what is of benefit to them. So if, for example, you do not do good to your community or to your patient or to your client, you will be liable to unethical issues. And that's why it is very important to follow the principle of beneficence. The other principle is autonomy and self-determination, whereby we respect the community member, we respect our client and our patient as people who are able to make their own decision without coercion or without being forced to do it. And when we're looking at the principle of autonomy, we should know that people should be able to make their own decision, and for someone to make their own decision, you're supposed to give them the right information. So again, the issue of informed consent. So you give people details, you disclose the whole information so that they are able to make the right decision regarding their health. Then the other principle is justice. And with justice, this is whereby you are fair and equal in whatever you're doing. So in distribution of goods and services, in providing care, you must ensure that you are fair. You do not actually harm others as you provide to other people. And there are several theories that you use to ensure that you maintain justice. There's an entitlement theory, we have utilitarian theory, Maximin theory, and egalitarian theory. And those are some of the theories that you're supposed to use when you are, and to ensure that you are just to your community. Then the other principle is non-maleficence. This principle stands on doing no harm to your community, doing no harm to your patient or to your client. And a good example is when you're giving immunization. We are giving so many immunization to children nowadays, and sometimes mothers will ask you, why are you injecting my child both legs? Why are you giving so many injection and so many immunization? Sometimes, yes, there will be a lot of harm because there may be harm because the child will cry, but the greatest good would be we are able to have herd immunity, and will protect children from infectious diseases. So, in summary, we have talked of legal and ethical issues. We've said legal issues come because of whatever the law states, and only a court can actually interpret whether you have a legal issue or not. And ethical issues, these are issues that arise because of failure to follow the ethical principles. And the moment we follow ethical principles to make decisions in providing care to our community, to our patient, to our client, then we'll reduce the ethical issues. So these are the references for what we have studied today. And you have an assignment for the next session. So I want you to look at models of health, look at health belief model, precede model, wellness illness model, and Florence Nightingale model of environmental theory. Thank you so much, and stay safe.
These televised lectures supplement our robust online learning going on our MKU online platform. You can view more on our televised lectures via our online platform. We are in a digital era, and Mount Kenya University knows this. The following are the steps to follow so as to complete your online application. Download the application form from the website www.mku.ac.ke. Attach copies of your academic certificates and ID. Pay the application fees via M-Pesa pay bill number 270988. Your ID is the account number. 2,000 shillings is the charge for a postgraduate. You can also deposit in the bank accounts provided on the website. Then email all the above to apply@mku.ac.ke.